everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Wisconsin Weather Experts on this Tuesday. Big day in Milwaukee, big day in Chicago. We're talking, of course, the Cubs-Brewers game, doubleheader today. First game taking place at about 1:20, so an hour 20 from now, and then 7:05 the next game.
Right. And that one you can see right here on Fox 6.
Yes, yes. And doubleheader today because yesterday evening's was postponed from the storms that Chicago saw.
Yeah, there you go. There's your weather angle right there. Of course, Wrigley does not have a roof. It was not a technology when that was built. There are other things in that stadium I'm told could use a tech update too, but we won't talk about that. There's some troughs.
It's historic,
involved.
okay.
It is, yeah. I mean, it is one of the amazing parks. I know you're a fan, so I'll try not to dwell too long on what happened yesterday. Could happen again today. As you saw on our live camera there, it is pretty gray there. We've actually seen some pretty gray skies with the occasional sunny break, but the pattern is broken. We're going to get into that with Chief Meteorologist Tom Wachs. You're going to take us through our regional forecast as well. Yesterday actually marked an interesting anniversary.
It did, and as we talk about it, I'm sure it'll ring a bell, but this week, yesterday, as Rob just mentioned, marks 2 decades since an EF3 tornado touched down in Dane County, leaving a 17-mile path of destruction. On August 18th, it touched down and tore through the towns of Dunn, Pleasant Springs, Christiana, Albion, Dunkirk, and the city of Stoughton. 1 person died and 23 others were injured. 69 homes were destroyed and more than 300 others were damaged. Now, estimates at the time put the cost at over $33 million, but adjusted for inflation today, that would be about $55 million. And you can just tell, I mean, that entire neighborhood, every house was touched.
Yeah, it's just wiped off the map.
Exactly.
It just looks like a wrecking crew went through there and tore that whole thing down.
And the trees.
And they're like, you can see by the pictures, they're just twisted off too.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable devastation. Again, 20 years ago as of yesterday. Of course, today, 20 years ago, there was a lot of cleaning up and the crews were out evaluating all of that stuff. So crazy. It was right before I started working here at Fox 6. And I remember having this conversation with then Chief Meteorologist Vince Candela and our general manager at the time, who would become my general manager, and talking about what had happened recently. Because I started in December. So yeah, an interesting date in weather history to be sure. Of course, we're living in what will eventually become an interesting date in weather history because it's been so active. And we're happy to report, things have really dried up pretty nicely, but the impacts of this flooding are going to be long lasting. There's a family of a missing Milwaukee man that fears the absolute worst in relation to the flooding. They see Miguel Angel Flores has been living beneath a bridge at First and Chase in a homeless encampment there that was absolutely washed away during last week's flooding. Fox 6's Ashley Sears has the search to find him.
There's still so much debris everywhere here.
This is where Arturo Vasquez's uncle had been living for the last couple of years.
You could see up to, how high the water raised.
The bridge beneath First and Chase is normally filled with tents and mattresses, but floodwaters recently washed them away.
Because it's completely empty.
Vasquez came here looking for his uncle Miguel Angel Flores. He says the 59-year-old was living here by choice and spoke to family daily. They haven't heard from him in more than a week.
We want to just have some closure to this.
They fear the worst, especially after finding out the bodies of at least 2 others Flores was supposed to be with last Saturday were discovered in the water in different areas of the city. A 72-year-old man was found in the water at Marina Drive, a 48-year-old man in the water at Harbor Drive.
It just breaks our hearts, it really does.
Linda Alvarado and Donalisa Hernandez are part of an outreach group that's come to the encampment weekly with food and prayer.
For families not to have closure, for the community not even to grieve them, is devastating. It's painful.
This family search has just begun, worried they may never get the answers they need.
It's been kind of heartbreaking, just knowing that my uncle could be out there somewhere in the river.
It's really sad story for sure.
Yeah, we're hoping for good news there.
Yeah, we'll hope for the best in that one, and of course we'll continue to report it to you as we find out more.
Yeah. Well, we have had a really hot and humid summer. I think we can all agree on that. And we're nearing, dare I say, our final weeks of August. And, looking long range, it does look like we have a little bit of a pattern shift in our midst. And chief meteorologist, that is, Tom Walks, breaks down what we could be seeing here in the next couple of weeks.
Well, we have been stuck in a weather pattern over the last couple of weeks where we've gotten these thunderstorm complexes, very heavy rainfall, and we've had the hot and very humid conditions, really more the humidity than anything else. But the weather pattern is changing starting today. Take a look at this here from a temperature standpoint. You see the heat off to the west there in the Intermountain West. Around here, much cooler. And by cooler, we mean temperatures generally in the 70s. We may warm up just a little bit for a time on Friday, but look up to the northwest here. Look at this cooler air up in Canada. And this is with a trough of low pressure that could move through this weekend. So here we are heading into late August now. This is quite the cool down if this verifies into the last week of August. So here's the bottom line with this. It does not look overly warm to end the month or even towards September 1st as well. This is an outlook that is put out by the Climate Prediction Center. And look at this, a good chunk of the country from August 26th to September 1st. So that's the time frame here for this general temperature outlook. Warmer air down along the Gulf Coast and in the deep south and in Texas. Meanwhile, a big chunk of the country here from the northeast to the upper Midwest seeing below average temperatures. And that, of course, matches with the data there and the forecast that you just saw as well. So this does a couple of things for us. Number one, it cools us down. But number two, it also takes us out of this complex by complex pattern we've been in, right? All these thunderstorm complexes that develop and then they leave boundaries behind and more storms form. That's why we've had the heavy rain. That's why we've had the flooding and seemingly nonstop rain around here, right? Well, now that the weather pattern is changing and we see these below average temperatures coming in, it's taking away that pattern of the thunderstorm complexes that are coming through. So what that means is much more dry time certainly than we've had, cooler temperatures and lower dew points as well. So the moisture levels are going to start to come down. And as you know, higher levels of moisture or higher dew points, that's been a big contributing factor, right, to the heavy rain as well. So everything in the atmosphere starting to settle down with this weather pattern change. But here's the bottom line. Below average temperatures on the way for the end of August, so it doesn't look like we have any end of summer heat waves on the way.
Oh, there you go. Everybody break out your pumpkin spice. I'm
right.
kidding.
If you're excited about it, but get out your favorite hoodie maybe in the days ahead. Lots of folks love that. Other folks aren't quite done with the heat. There's still a lot of heat out there as we kick off the regional forecast.
Yeah.
Just not in our neighborhood.
Take a look at forecast highs out west today. Look at all those spots that could hit triple digits. So yeah, the heat's not here, but there is still a lot of it out west. In fact, look at the Dakotas down to Denver and El Paso, New Mexico. Forecast highs well into the 90s. And look at these triple digits from Montana all the way down into the southwest. That is some serious heat. Even parts of the southern plains could see those upper 90s and low 100s, places like Dallas, Texas. Now here locally, we're actually getting a little bit of a break. Now dew points are a little lower than the last couple of days, still noticeable though, so it's still a little humid out there. But eastern parts of Wisconsin will likely stay in the 70s today. A lot of those 80s and more of the heat will stay out towards the west. So today is still looking really, really good. Not as much sunshine, but a little bit of a break from some of the heat we've had as of late. Overall, the forecast is actually favoring slightly below average temperatures, aside from maybe Thursday and especially Friday. We are going to have a warm front that's going to allow temperatures Friday to climb likely into the low 80s, but then at night, a cold front's going to roll through. It's going to bring in a chance for some showers and storms, but it really is going to usher in pleasant weather for the weekend. We're talking high temperatures, maybe even low 70s in some lakeshore communities both of those days, but then also some of that lower humidity. So the weekend right now is looking spectacular. Now, we've dealt with rain, as we know, the past couple of weekends, especially 2 weekends ago. So to potentially have not only comfortable conditions, but also sunny conditions both Saturday and Sunday. An absolute treat for those of us in Milwaukee. Now, your dew point forecast for the next couple of days. Dew points today are still going to be sticky and muggy in those mid-60s, and even tomorrow we have just the very slight chance for a sprinkle from time to time coming in off of the lake. So dew points will still be in the low 60s. We'll feel a little bit drier than Thursday with that warm front climbing just a little bit dew point wise Friday, and looking really good as we just talked about for Saturday as well as Sunday. It's actually pretty quiet right now in our neck of the woods, especially out towards the west, too. It's all about the heat around the western portions of our country. We will see more scattered thunderstorm activity down towards the south of us today, as well as down towards the Gulf Coast. But here in the Great Lakes region, all of the rain that we saw yesterday is now making its way eastward to the east coast. So we still have cloud cover, but look at this high pressure that's gradually going to sink southward. That is eventually going to bring us maybe later today a few peaks of sunshine across the state, especially out west. Then a little bit more cloud cover for Wednesday before clearing right back out on Thursday. Take a look at the storm reports, though, the rainfall reports from some communities yesterday. Even those of us near the Wisconsin-Illinois border in Wisconsin saw some high rainfall totals. Parts of southern Walworth County over 2.5 inches of rain, and a lot of heavy rain also around the Chicagoland area. You can see that especially west and south of Chicago. That's radar estimating 6-7 inches worth of rainfall. There is a severe threat very low down towards the south, so that gives you a better picture of where the thunderstorm activity will be today and where the heavy rainfall threat will be today. Here locally, again, we are looking pretty good with eventually a few peaks of sunshine for the afternoon. Now for Wednesday, you can see some of the cloud cover from the north moving back in. It is very possible we see just a few light scattered showers or sprinkles off and on throughout Wednesday, but then by Thursday, full sunshine is back. I will leave you with one final look at the tropics. We've been trying to talk about this day after day with the fact that we still have Erin churning in the Atlantic. It is currently a Category 2 storm. It is continuing to push up towards the northwest, but heading into the end of the week should start to make its way eastward and then back away from land. So not expecting direct landfall to the U.S., but it is very possible that we still see along the east coast maybe some rip currents or some high waves. So if you have loved ones in areas of the East Coast, make sure they're aware that this system is still out in the Atlantic. Let's take a live look outside right now. Oh, we are back to Wrigleyville. This does hold a special place in my heart, but I do love the Brewers too. We'll be back. Welcome back, everybody, to Wisconsin Weather Experts, exclusively here on Fox Local, as well as our Fox 6 YouTube page. Well, you know, it's no secret we have dealt with a lot of really heavy rain over the last couple of weeks, especially 2 weekends ago with that historic flooding. We're starting to see more and more of this with how high our dew points are. Chief Meteorologist Rob Haswell had the opportunity to sit down with Climate Central's Shel Winkley to talk more about all of the downpours we've had recently.
A very good friend of the show joins us now. Shel Winkley has joined us to talk about this crazy weather. I mean, look, you and I love to dig into the science about it. Atmospheric science is very evolved. We know a lot about our atmosphere, but every now and again, Mother Nature and planet Earth like to throw us a little curveball, keep us on our toes. So let's dig into what's been going on lately. It's been an interesting few months, to say the least.
It has. And, you know, Milwaukee is one of the latest of what makes this summer so interesting. And I think what's going to make this summer such a standout summer, which has just been the, different events, the flooding events. We saw it in Texas. We saw it in the Carolinas. We experienced it in Chicago. We had the flooding in Ruidoso, New Mexico, just to name a few, New York City. And now the latest is, of course, Milwaukee, that recently had a big flood that's historic, but also just an incredible amount of rain that came down in just a very short amount of time.
And that seems to be kind of a theme the last little while. I mean, obviously there was definitely an outlying event that happened on Sunday or this past weekend, but even just some of our more routine events have been far more moisture laden, far heavier downpours.
Right. And we know a couple different things, and we'll jump in, but I want to start with the fact that this summer, and it's not just a United States thing, right? Globally, we're seeing one of the top three most moisture-laden atmospheres. So we call it precipitable water. It's essentially the moisture that can make rainfall, and we're at record levels. And we know that with a warmer climate, we can hold on to more moisture. Let's step back for just a second, though, and let's talk about just the summer season, right? Because we know that rainfall isn't new to summer, and that it's a time of the year that we expect quite a bit. So you're looking at the country. Here is summer. We're talking June, July, August. And just looking at this map, you can kind of really pick out the patterns that make summertime a rainy one, specifically from the Rockies up to the northern United States to the Midwest, right? You usually have a big area of high pressure over Texas or the Southeast, and that's going to direct the moisture your way, which for Milwaukee and Wisconsin specifically means that most of your rainfall, when it comes down in precipitation form, be it snow or liquid, most of that falls in the summer season.
Yeah, which is, makes sense on a certain level because we all know warmer air holds more moisture. So it would make sense. But the extremes now are becoming a little bit more obvious, right? This isn't just a seasonal adjustment.
Right. And so we have talked about this together a couple of times, but we know that with a warmer atmosphere, I like to say it's a greedier atmosphere. So it can create more intense droughts because it's taking more moisture from the soil, but we also know it can hold more moisture. And when our oceans are warmer than average, it also means that there's more evaporation that allows the atmosphere to hold on to this moisture. For every 1 degree Fahrenheit of warming, our atmosphere can hold about 4% more moisture, which what that turns into is something very similar to what we saw just last week. Heavier rainfall that can bring more damage or more inconvenience to you. So let's put a money value on this, right? And we know that Milwaukee specifically, looking at the worst rainfall events, an estimated average annual loss of about $20 million or more is not out of the question when you're looking at these heavy rainfall events. And we expect with future warming that can increase. So that's the money side of things. But this all ties back to just the general science of what we understand, right? So for your part of the country, looking at the latest IPCC report from 1958 to 2021, we have already seen a 45% increase, one of the highest in the country for your backyard when it comes to the heaviest rainfall days, much like what we saw just a couple of days ago. And what I think is great about this science, because we understand what's happening now, but what happens if we don't bring down this heat trapping pollution that's allowing for more moisture to go into the atmosphere? Well, we can look at future warming. And we know that with 2 degrees Celsius of warming, or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, right now we're at 1.3, we can see the hot spots of the country that are expected to experience even more rainfall. So for Milwaukee specifically, we could see an increase of 20 to 30% in terms of these heaviest 1% of our rainfall days.
Right, and that's going to put additional stress on infrastructure. It's going to call for municipalities and communities to, find ways to mitigate the flood water. A lot of homeowners, especially those that live in older homes that maybe weren't built for any of this, they're going to have to invest in ways to keep their houses, their properties, and all of our area roadways dry.
Right, exactly. And infrastructure is one of the biggest things because we know that a lot of our aging infrastructure was kind of struggling to keep up with what we were dealing with already. So if you add more rainfall that's coming down even heavier, even faster, and all this water is rushing out, that's why we see these get overwhelmed. You mentioned the home aspect of it. And really, if none of that even impacts you, it's also just trying to get around, right? Trying to live your life, take your kids to school, pick your kids up from school, whatever it may be. This is going to be one of those things that it's just anything from an inconvenience to the extreme, which is much like what we saw just last weekend.
Right. I mean, even just little things like prolonged construction projects because you can't work through the flood. The flood sets things back. We all hate having to drive around all this construction work, and we love it when it's over. But if it's adding 2-3 weeks, maybe 2-3 months to these projects, that's a huge inconvenience. And of course, once again, follow the money comes back to a bigger expense, which eventually comes out of our own pockets.
Exactly. Right. And I think the biggest takeaway to remember here is that we live on a water planet. Water is so important to so many different things, right? We are loading the dice. So again, we're taking normal rainfall events and we're making them just a little bit different, making them a little more unnatural by adding more moisture for these weather systems to feed into and then create bigger inconveniences for us.
Right. And flooding is one of the biggest insurance claims. It's also one of the biggest killers on the planet when it comes to weather-related death. And it's also one of the biggest spreading when it comes to spreading disease as well.
Right. And we know, again, with warming, some places, the mosquitoes and those insects that can create those diseases, right? Mosquitoes, ticks, things like that. They're moving away from their typical places that they were living, which means that they're going further north as they're following that warming, which means that your mosquito season is actually increasing as well. Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that when we get to camping season. And, it's also one of those tricky things to communicate. So I thank you for coming on and doing that. But, thinking back to one of the maps you put up there, it is a greedy atmosphere and it does mean more rain for almost everybody, but I saw the Pacific Northwest is actually drier.
Yeah, so that's a couple different things, right? So we know that this water cycle is happening in different ways. Our weather patterns aren't lining up the same. I mentioned that it also can create more drought, and that's a thing that we're really seeing in the West. So when it's a greedier atmosphere, let's say you get a really good rainfall, you're in a drought, but then you don't have another rain event for another month or two. So what that can do is pull more moisture out of the ground, more moisture out of the vegetation, and it makes it easier to fall into what we call those flash drought conditions. And it makes it much harder to get out of drought conditions, which is the opposite effect than what you're experiencing there in Wisconsin, right? The West is begging for rainfall. Right. They need that good rainfall. So it's really interesting how it's playing out from west of the Rocky Mountains and east of the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, meanwhile, we're soaking in it for sure. Thank you so much, Shel. We could go on and on, but we got to keep it to tight time for TV. I think we've really uncovered some interesting thoughts, and I like your point here that it's a greedy atmosphere. I've borrowed that line a few times before because you're right. Not only greedy in soaking up moisture and delivering it back to us, but taking it out of the soil. I think that's an interesting twist that not a lot of folks have probably thought about either. Appreciate your time. We'll talk again soon.
All right, sounds good.
We always value our time with Shel Winkley. Always has the greatest insight as to what's happening day by day in our ever-changing atmosphere. We have a little bit more coming up on Wisconsin Weather Experts. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody, to Wisconsin Weather Experts. Well, we, of course, enjoyed our air and water show earlier this summer, but just previously this weekend, Chicago got to see their own spectacular sight in the air. The Chicago Air and Water Show draws spectators from all over for its jaw-dropping performers. The summer tradition returned to the Windy City this past weekend. Now, the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds and the U.S. Army Golden Knights parachute team headlined the show. Spectators, young and old, say they were excited to watch, of course, this popular show.
I'm super excited. We've been talking about this for like months as a family. So we've been like the family group chat, like, okay, so like we got to meet up at this time. We got to get there and make sure we save a spot for everybody.
This has quickly become one of my favorite summer staples to see. Now, there were military and civilian performers, along with Chicago Police Department helicopters, among many others. Always just the best time, especially for kiddos, just seeing their faces in awe. And then, of course, covering their ears with how loud those performers are. Thanks for staying with us for another episode of Wisconsin Weather Experts. We will see you right back here tomorrow at noon.